what does submitting an early FAFSA California DREAM Act application mean? So the first thing I want to do is actually define what these applications are. And so the first one I want to start with is actually the FAFSA. So the FAFSA stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. And so what this means is that with an application that doesn't cost anything to complete, you can apply for federal money as a college student to go ahead and pay for whatever expenses you may have here at CSUN or in college in general. Now by aid, it means that we're here to just assist you and help you and support you. We don't replace the expectation of whatever it is that you or your family would have to actually pay. The other thing too is that we have this is the official website, which is FAFSA.gov. That's the official website to go ahead and complete your application. Let's see. The next thing is the priority deadline to complete the application is actually March 2nd. FAFSA has a June 30th deadline that they actually advertise, but for purposes of here at CSUN and for purposes here in California, we have a priority deadline on March 2nd. And I'll go further into what that actually means, especially as it relates to the guarantee. There are 4 types of aid that you are eligible to receive when you submit the FAFSA. Especially if you submit it on time, then you can be considered for all 4 types of aid. And they include grants, which can be either federal grants or state grants. Grants by definition do not have to be paid. They are actually considered free money. But you could also be considered for loans, and these loans are federal student loans that do have to be paid back. Then you can also be eligible and considered for scholarships. And also we would consider you for work study. And work study is an award that is free, but you have to earn it through work. You have to find an on-campus work study job. Now, the CATA, which is an acronym for the California DREAM Act application, this is an application only in California for students who are planning to go to college and would like to receive aid and at this time are not eligible to complete the FAFSA. One of the things about the California DREAM Act is for students who at this time are without legal immigration status, but they went ahead and met the AB 540 criteria, which is basically that you lived in California for a large portion of your life, but you also graduated from a California high school and are also planning to attend a California college. And so therefore you can go ahead and apply for this as well. The official website to apply for the California DREAM Act application is dream.csac.california.gov, and it's because it's run by the California Student Aid Commission, and so they go ahead and have their own website for that. The priority deadline is March 2nd, and that one is a kind of like an official deadline as well because it's a California program, it's a California application. They actually do have that deadline and they're a stickler for it. The types of aid that you could only be considered if you complete the California DREAM Act application is actually grants, which would only be state grants. That's still considered free money, but it's only state grants. And then the other one is possibly a dream loan, and that depends every year whether it's going to be offered or not, but basically it's a loan offered to students who completed the California DREAM Act application and that they can use towards paying for classes, but they understand that they have to pay that back. Scholarships, you can definitely apply for scholarships with the California DREAM Act application because especially if they're offered here in the state, then you are definitely welcome to apply for those as well. Question, can I apply for both FAFSA and the DREAM Act? That is a very good question. The answer is no. You'd have to actually apply for one or the other. If you are eligible for the FAFSA, then you want to submit the FAFSA. If you're eligible only for the DREAM Act application, then you only complete the DREAM Act application. Good question. All right, so what is the guarantee if, which is the question, if I submit an early FAFSA or California DREAM Act, what is the guarantee? Guarantee number one is that you will be considered for the most aid possible. And so that's very important to understand. It's because students have heard, and it's kind of true, that if you wait a little longer, then it's possible that you may not be eligible to receive the full funding, and that's correct. So if you submit an on-time application, then you can be considered for the most aid possible. So in order for that to occur, is you need to submit your FAFSA or California DREAM Act by March 2nd. The second thing is that the March 2nd is considered a priority deadline. It's not an ultimate deadline. So let me explain what that means. March 2nd basically is it's a state deadline. And the reason why we want to honor our state deadline is because it gives us enough time to review applications and award students the most aid possible. Now, the reason why it's not an ultimate deadline is because you are welcome, at least in terms of FAFSA, to submit a FAFSA on March 3rd or thereafter, but the guarantee is not there anymore, right? We may not be able to award you the most aid possible because we want students to submit it prior to the March 2nd deadline or priority deadline. So that's why I kind of use priority deadline, and I just don't say deadline, because ultimate deadline there really isn't, but a priority deadline there is. So what is considered an on-time application? An on-time application is someone who submits it between October 1st, which is the earliest you can submit a FAFSA or California DREAM Act, and March 2nd. And that's considered an on-time file or an on-time application. Awards include work study and most scholarships. So work study funds and scholarships also honor the FAFSA, and they reward students who actually submit an on-time application. So if you submit it between October 1st and March 2nd, then you put yourself in a position to be valued for the most aid possible, which includes work study and most scholarships. Now, it is very important that you understand that we have to receive a completed and valid FAFSA or California DREAM Act by the priority deadline. So just the fact that you started the application and then finished it after the March 2nd doesn't make it an on-time application. It has to be completed, sealed, sent off, and that there's no errors on it by the time we receive it prior to March 2nd. And so that's one of the reasons why they opened up the October 1st early submission timeline, only because it gives people enough time that should they need to address their finances or anything that they need to look at, they have more than ample time to complete it. So it's important to note that if we successfully get an application completed prior to March 2nd, then it's considered a completed application and it's valid. Sometimes I find that students may get an application started prior to March 2nd, but it's not complete, or they submit it, but it has errors, and then we get it finally sometime in late March or something like that. Then it's not considered on time anymore because it wasn't completed or valid until all the errors were addressed, whatever that may be. Now, FAFSA is on Eastern Standard Time. Not the California DREAM Act. The California DREAM Act is just a California application, so of course it's Pacific Standard Time. But I want to make a point about the FAFSA, the fact that it's on Eastern Standard Time. What does that mean? California is on Pacific Standard Time. This means that the FAFSA is 3 hours ahead. The earliest you can submit a FAFSA is October 1st at midnight. In California, though, the earliest you can submit the FAFSA is at 9 p.m. on September 30th. This works in your favor. On the other hand, it can hurt you if you wait until the last minute to submit. The priority deadline in California is 8:59 p.m. March 2nd. Why? Because when you submit the FAFSA, it gets an Eastern Standard Time stamp. We find our students tell us that they submitted their FAFSAs on March 2nd prior to midnight, but it's considered late because 10 p.m., for example, is already 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. My advice to you is to not wait until the last minute. Submit it as early as possible. Here's a visual representation of this timeline, but also what happens with money if you wait to submit the FAFSA or California DREAM Act. So as you can see here on the horizontal line, I have the dates, right? So if you submit it between October 1st and March 2nd, as you can see by the line represented by many dollar signs, you're considered for the most aid possible. But what happens if it's March 3rd or April 2nd or June 1st or August 2nd? So anytime after the priority deadline, well, you still receive money. But as you can see by the trajectory, you start getting less money. And so if you submit it on time, then you can be evaluated for the most aid possible. Maximum aid is October 1st to March 2nd. Now you can submit after March 2nd, but it's considered late. And by late just basically means that you may just end up receiving less aid. You'll still get something. And so sometimes I tell families and students, it's better to submit than not submit at all, because it's very rewarding to know that at least you were able to receive something. But congratulations if you were able to submit it between October 1st and March 2nd. We guarantee that we will evaluate you for the most aid possible because you give us enough time to do so as well. What's the guarantee number 2? So there's only 2 guarantees when you submit an early FAFSA or California DREAM Act. The second one is that you get awarded on time. And so if students worry about, will I get my money before school starts, the answer is yes. We guarantee that we will definitely have your money available to you. So you will get your money by the first day of the term, if not a little sooner than that, but definitely by that time. The second thing is that you are notified in a timely manner of any missing items on your file. Because you were successful in submitting a FAFSA on time, you give us enough time to evaluate your file a little bit more carefully so that we can, maximize the aid that you can receive. And we can go ahead and see if we're missing, for example, anything related to verification, right? That's when we need to check the accuracy of your data to see if it's complete. We may also have to check, we will actually check your satisfactory academic progress. We call it SAP, which is an acronym for satisfactory academic progress. What does that mean? Well, that means that one of the eligibility requirements to receive aid is that you have to be a good student. And so if you submit a FAFSA on time, you give us enough time to go ahead and evaluate that. And we usually evaluate academic progress at the end of June, usually when all professors have successfully submitted their grades. We can also check for any other missing documents. And so by submitting an on-time application, we can award you on time because if you address any of these items, especially missing documents, something that we need to address like an error or something, or a clarification, then you give us enough time. And we try to do this very quickly. I mean, we start in March, late March, April, May, June, July, and so we can definitely be able to have your file ready to go. So one of the tips that I'd like to give students is make sure you're always checking your CSUN email. We do our best to try to inform you and keep you posted on what's going on. So let's say you successfully submit your FAFSA or your California DREAM Act. We can go ahead and let you know by email, oh, congratulations, we received it, everything is good. Please log into your CSUN portal so you can check your to-do list so that you can address any items that we may be missing so that we can go ahead and complete your file. So other things to consider. Make sure your FAFSA or your California DREAM Act is completed correctly. That's just a tip that I'd like to give you, that when you're working on your FAFSA or California DREAM Act application, take the time to really make sure everything's fine. Make sure that you cross your T's, dotted your I's, that the numbers are what they're supposed to be, and we want you to be accurate with the information you're providing. And so it's important that you do that for us. Help us make sure that the information you submitted is correct. So address any errors. Maybe you were successful in submitting the FAFSA on time, but maybe after reviewing it, you saw that there was probably a mistake. Well, it's still considered valid if it went through completely, but you still could go ahead and correct your FAFSA should there be a mistake or something that you need to address. As I mentioned, only valid completed FAFSAs or California DREAM Acts are considered on time by the priority deadline. So let me elaborate some more on what that means. So let's say you successfully submitted a FAFSA or California DREAM Act on February 5th, just for the sake of argument. But then you end up realizing sometime in late March that there was a mistake. that, oh my God, I put an extra zero where it shouldn't have been. It's actually not right. Well, you're going to go ahead and correct it and submit it. Is it considered on time? You bet it is. Why? Because we received a prior valid FAFSA, even if there was a mistake on it, because it went through, right? Now, on the other hand, let's say it's February 5th and you started working on your FAFSA or California DREAM Act, and you submitted it, but it wasn't considered valid because there was something that truncated it, that it stopped it from going through, and then you address the issue sometime after March. Well, once we finally get it, which is the first one technically that's now successfully completed, it's going to have a later date, so it's going to be considered late because it wasn't considered valid. It wasn't, the term that we use is kind of like a rejected FAFSA or a rejected California DREAM Act. It's a bad word, but just basically means on our end that there's something that's not allowing it to go through. So that's just kind of what that means. If we successfully receive a valid California DREAM Act or a FAFSA, we go ahead and email you, and we'll let you know. That's why it's important to check your CSUN email. Everything's cool, we got it, but it's your job, or please help us making sure that it's correct. Address any to-do items on your CSUN portal. That's just another thing that I mentioned that I just want to stress that it's important because let's say school is getting ready to start and then you realize, well, where's my aid? I haven't been awarded. I submitted it on time. Well, yes, but there may have been other things you needed to address that weren't addressed, and so therefore it's now delayed. Now, FAFSA and the California DREAM Act, maybe you knew this, maybe you didn't, requires prior year tax information. So now, for the first time, you don't have to wait. Okay, stop. What does that mean? Well, what that means that moving forward, when you complete your FAFSA, you'll have the information more readily available now because we're asking for a prior year than last year. So now we just need information from kind of quote unquote 2 years ago. So here's an example. The 2017-18 FAFSA or California DREAM Act that you're completing is asking for 2015 tax information. All right, and this information was already completed, so you have it readily available. So now there's no longer an excuse that, oh, I'm sorry, I'm submitting my FAFSA late because, or my California DREAM Act because I didn't have the tax information readily available. No, it's actually possible to submit it early. When you start submitting your 2018-19 FAFSA or California DREAM Act, it's going to ask for your 2016 tax information. And then lastly, when you submit your 2019-20 FAFSA or California DREAM Act application, it's going to ask for your 2017 tax info. And so this is very, very new, but I just want to share this so that you can see that it is possible to submit an on-time application, especially if you were concerned about having your tax information readily available. By this time, by the time you fill it out, it's definitely going to be ready to go. Now, exclusively only for the FAFSA, a tip that I'd like to give you is one of the ways to reduce the margin of error, because I mentioned that earlier, is to consider using the IRS data retrieval tool. When you use the IRS data retrieval tool, you're basically giving FAFSA permission to go out to the IRS, get your tax information that you've already completed or your family has already completed, and populate the necessary or the exact items on the FAFSA with that IRS data information. The reason why I said that the margin of error is closer to zero is because the data is being populated so you actually see it, and so you don't make the mistake of maybe adding an extra zero or putting it in the wrong place. The data is put where it's supposed to be. And so that's a tip that I like to give. Now, so let's say you were successful in completing your FAFSA today and everything is good. You can go back later and do the IRS data retrieval, but remember, because we already received a valid FAFSA or California DREAM Act, we're going to honor that first submission, and as long as it's on time, then you're actually good. So therefore, why not go ahead and do the IRS data retrieval, right, so that you can go ahead and have a most accurate FAFSA or California DREAM Act, and therefore also you can help yourself maximize the aid that you can go ahead and receive.